This is the Let's Go Win podcast with your host, JM Ryerson.
What's happening, you guys? Welcome back to the Let's Go Win podcast, where we are here to help you be happy, healthy, and wealthy and get better every single day. We have an amazing gentleman on today. He has quite the bio. I was reading it. I was like, okay, this has some dynamic different things that he's done. So I'm really excited to hear the conversation. Héctor Colón is the president and CEO of Lutheran Social Services of Wisconsin and Upper Michigan LSS. Under his visionary and servant leadership approach, Colón adapted new models and business strategies to increase impact and viability, resulting in a multi-million-dollar financial turnaround. Héctor is a seven-time national boxing champion and authored his first book, My Journey from Boxing Ring to Boardroom: 5 Essential Virtues for Life and Leadership. Héctor, welcome to the show, brother. How you doing?
Thank you so much, JM. I'm doing great, and thank you for having me.
Well, I'm excited to have you because it's not often you see. I went from the boxing ring to the boardroom, so the book sounds awesome, but your story, I'm guessing that's a big part of your story. How does one go from that? Because you don't hear that every day. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, it really started off by me being bullied as a young child. I was 9 years old. I was bullied by a kid that didn't want people with the color of my skin in his neighborhood. He hit me in the face. I came home with a bloody nose. And then my father said, "What happened? ¿Qué te pasó?" And I told him what happened. And then he took me to the boxing gym. And I remember being intimidated, not wanting to really be there. And then he introduced me to Israel Acosta, who is the boxing coach there, who they call Shorty, who's a giant in my life. He's a giant in this community. He put me in front of the mirror and started showing me some boxing combinations. And I remember him very vividly telling my father, "Your son is a natural. He's going to become a champion." So that's where it's all started, that overwhelming belief in me in a very short interaction that really changed my life.
There's so many lessons. Now, I never boxed personally in terms of competed, but I love hitting the bag. I think there's so many amazing lessons. As I told you, for those of you watching on screen, he's got Muhammad Ali behind him. Is my favorite athlete of all time, even though I never watched him live. I only saw video and I've only seen so much of that. But the lessons learned from this amazing sport, if you were to break them down, Héctor, to say, I really, from the ring to succeeding in life, these are some of the things that I got from it. Because you can talk about, okay, it's a violent sport and it's got this, you're trying to do that, but there's so much more to this amazing sport that you clearly, I don't know, master, but certainly are a champion of. What are some of the big lessons that you learned from boxing that you wish everybody could experience?
Yeah, I'll share the 5 virtues that are in my book, and I'll go through each of the virtues and really share how that not only transformed my life in the ring, but really helped me excel to a CEO and the boardroom. And the first virtue is courage. There's no greater fear than entering into that ring. That fear you feel is absolutely terrible. I don't care if you're Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield, Julio Cesar Chavez, or Héctor Colón. You're going into that ring with a little bit of fear, but fear that you might lose, fear that you might get knocked out, or fear that you might be humiliated. But you go into that ring with courage, and it is that dedication, that determination, and that discipline, that self-preparedness that gives you the confidence to enter into that ring. And then there's nothing like having those hands raised in triumph because you know you work so hard to achieve your goal. So that virtue of courage is so important to get into the boxing ring, But to get into the ring of life, to advance to a new leadership role, to sit on that board in that boardroom, to address a certain challenge that you might be facing along your life. So having that virtue of courage, I learned in the boxing ring. It really helped me in life in general.
Yeah, and I can't wait to hear the other four. But before we get to those, you mentioned Mike Tyson, who, again, that would be the era of boxing that I really grew up with, is watching him. And I read his his biography. And one of the things he talked about is how scared he was every time. We're talking Iron Mike. We're talking the guy at some point people thought was invincible. At some point, there was a moment in history. But he talked about how he would use the fear to punish his opponents, and what a gentle kid he was off. And most people don't know this about him, how he, would raise pigeons and these things. And he was actually a very gentle soul. But once he turned that on, obviously that skill, some of the savagery that he had came out. But the fact that he could say, look, I was scared every single time I stepped in the ring. I think that's that you don't hear that often. And I like that. Let's talk about the fact that you have these butterflies. So I really am glad that you brought him up, because I mean, what a great example of a human being that's done so many things, and now he's in a whole different path of life, which is amazing. So let's get to the next one, which is one of my favorites. If you're going down the line, humility is literally, this is maybe my favorite virtue that a human being can have. So I can't wait to hear this.
Yeah, it's also my favorite too. I probably humility, magnanimity, but I love them all. But humility is not thinking less about yourself, but more of others. And again, I learned this in boxing. So you might think boxing is a one-on-one sport. It's not. You need a coach. You need sparring partners. You have fans. You have supporters. You have a cut man. You have so many people that help you become that champion. And I also learned from my coach, Shorty, how much he loved me. He would sacrifice his nights for me. I would come back from baseball practice, 7:00 at night. Who's there waiting for me alone? Shorty, so that he could train me. Then he would sacrifice his weekends for me, his vacations, so that he can come to my fights. This man even took me into his own home, where he loved me and fed me and made sure I would be a champion both in and out of the ring. And so I learned that virtue of humility through Shorty and through the boxing. And let's be honest, you become humble. Boxers are some of the most humble people on earth. You might not think about that because there's a lot of show and you want to outpsych your opponent. There's a lot of smash talking before the fight. But after that fight, everything calms down. You really respect your opponent. You hug your opponent. And you really appreciate the fact that you guys were trying to kill each other. And now the fight's over, you can relax. And so that virtue of humility, I definitely learned in boxing. And how do you equate that into life? So I now, as a CEO, I espouse a servant leadership approach. And that's about thinking, again, more of my colleagues, putting them at the forefront, acknowledging them, appreciating them, co-creating the vision, the direction, and the strategy of the organization with them instead of dictating it to them. And if you look at servant leadership, the Fortune 500 companies that have a servant leader as their CEO outperform those that do not. So this virtue of humility is super powerful in impacting others. And when you do that, it has a larger ripple effect on more that are surrounding you as well.
Yeah, there's so much to break down in this segment right here, because being humbled, obviously boxing, being knocked out. Again, I've never fought in the ring, but I have been knocked out. That as a younger gentleman, I've been in quite a few scuffles, and it's a humbling experience where you're like, okay. And I imagine whether Hector, I'll just ask you, Have you ever been knocked out? Yes or no?
Not knocked out. I was knocked down once, only once. It was kind of a flash knocked out. I got back up. But yeah, it happens to the best of us, and you get humbled, but then it's also that perseverance of getting back up and getting back up, and we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, his defense is clearly better than mine. He only got knocked down one, and I wasn't even a fighter. But the other thing that you talked about that I love about sports in general, you go in, and obviously so much of that is show to build up for the pay-per-view and the professionals when they're doing that. But to appreciate the discipline that each of these fighters has, the camps that they went through to get in the unbelievable shape, how can you not respect the other person across that ring? Because they're going in to do the exact same thing you are. You can't not want to just say, you know what, I love you, brother, even though I want to put you down. That's my goal. I think that's one of the most beautiful things about the sport. But the servant leadership idea, and I'm so curious, brother, because this is literally my favorite type of leadership. It is what I hope every CEO would adapt and would adopt, excuse me. And it's interesting that Lutheran Social Services, because when I think of servant leadership, and this is not to make it a religious podcast, but the greatest form of servant leadership is Jesus Christ himself. And I don't know if that was what really showed you the way, or if it was Shorty, or where that came from. But when you say servant leadership, I want people to understand what that really means and how impactful it is. I just think it's beautiful. So was that really from boxing, or was that your faith, or where did you really learn this, Hector?
I'd say three key people. First, my mother. So my mother was a servant leader. We grew up poor. My father moved to Puerto Rico and got a divorce with my mom when I was 12 years old. Never sent any money, no support, no calls, just gone. And I never heard my mother complain. She worked 2 and 3 jobs to support the family. My sister was addicted to drugs, co-occurring mental illness, had boyfriends. My mom was their boyfriend's case managers. We took in homeless people. So I first and foremost, I learned it from my mother and how she served others and made other people feel great. Then I learned it from Shorty. He was the one in the background while I was shining, my hands raised, and he's just smiling in the background, and took me into his own home and did everything he could do to make sure he could bring out the champion in me. And then, yes, Jesus Christ. In fact, I didn't share this, but when I won 7 titles, I was on the verge to go into the Olympics in 1992. I was favored to go to the Olympics as a welterweight. I was 19 years old. I was so excited. I was going to win that gold medal and sign that multi-million-dollar contract. And honestly, I wasn't focused, mind, body, and spirit. And I lost. And I was absolutely devastated. I was no longer going to win that gold medal. The promoters about that multi-million-dollar contract, I wasn't receiving those calls, and I was hurting and I was searching. And on December 27, 1992, I went to Holy Hill Catholic Church here, bought my first Bible, and I gave my life to Christ. My life totally transformed. 6 months later, the guy that robbed me of my Olympic dreams, we fight again for the U.S. welterweight championship title. This time I knocked him out in the first round. It was on cable television. I came on the inside cover of Sports Illustrated. I was on the front cover of USA Boxing magazine. And you know what? The promoters came back and wanted to talk. But I did put it through a year of prayer and discernment and ended up feeling a strong calling away from the sport. I beat many world champions like Vernon Forrest, who became a 4-time world champion. I beat him twice. I knocked out Jose Antonio Rivera, who became a 3-time world champion. But I felt a strong calling away from the sport, and I was inspired by Jesus and his example, and I tried to follow him.
Yeah, it's an amazing, amazing story. I mean, to be able to take down these amazing fighters and say, you know what, I'm really good at this, but I'm feeling called somewhere else. We could do a whole episode on that. That's amazing. Temperance is the next one. And you don't hear this word often. You have a couple words in here you don't hear often. So temperance, tell me about that, Hector.
Temperance is one of the most difficult virtues, by the way. And this is about having the self-control and restraint and not reacting to a situation that could ruin your life, your soul, and your career. And you learn this in the sport of boxing, because when you're in that ring, there's a lot of smash talking before that fight. You have to stay composed and calm, and don't let that get into your psyche. Or when you're in the ring, let's say you get hit, and all of a sudden you're dazed. You can't react and start brawling. You have to stay composed and calm and tell yourself, okay, how do I make sure that doesn't happen again? Or let's say the individual hits you with a low blow, and the referee doesn't see the low blow. You can't retaliate with a low blow, because now the referee might see it and you could get disqualified. And so you learn that virtue of temperance. You have to stay calm and composed. And that translates, again, into life and leadership. When you're a CEO and, not everybody loves you, or, somebody might say something about you, and you can't react to that in that situation in a way that could demean your own self. You got to stay composed and calm and let it go. Or sometimes there's a situation that's bothering you. Maybe something went wrong, and instead of just pouncing and reacting, take a pause and think about it. And maybe you can react to that the next day. And it's oftentimes going to be much more productive when you have time to reflect and concentrate and really think through it before you react. So that virtue, it's also, we all have natural impulses, and sometimes, that could lead to doing something that's not good. It could be drinking or gambling or other types of things that could overwhelm us. And so that virtue of temperance is so important to help us overcome that.
Well, and you gave me a little glimpse into your background. You said you didn't grow up with a lot of money. I know the area, or I'm assuming Milwaukee, there's some tough parts of that city, especially I'm thinking of the time you grew up. And you're a 19 or less, that whatever, 12 to 19, a lot of hormones going on, been bullied so easily. And I think about this all the time. I have 17 and 13-year-old sons. And I think of my own experience where these decisions that could have been made, the paths that we could have gone down. I think that's what you're talking about, where, again, you have these lethal hands. It's not like you're in necessarily this easy area, and you could easily have made poor decisions outside the ring. But I'm guessing temperance is what kept you down that straight and narrow path before you really brought faith into your life. Am I jumping to conclusions here, brother? I'm just curious, because I think of this often about how many times I could have veered, and I could have gone down that fork in the road, the one path that could have led down the really negative one, and somehow I lucked out, or something was looking out for me going this way. I think of temperance when you're talking about that, and I'm trying to put myself in your shoes as that teenager with these lethal hands to say, man, how many times could I have made the poor decision outside of the ring?
I'm going to share, I'm getting a little emotional here, actually. I want to share two stories with you. And this one story just happened very recently. So here I am. This really, it talks about temperance. I'm in this restaurant a few years ago. I see the conversation not going well with another individual. So I get up and I try to leave. This guy got in front of me. I gently and firmly put my hand on his chest. I said, back up, let me leave. He wouldn't back up. So I sidestepped it one more time, tried to leave again. He got right in front of me. I'm embarrassed. So I sit back down. He began to taunt me, make fun of me, was provoking me. He literally was provoking me. I could not believe. And my hands clenched. And I was thinking, I'm going to knock this guy out. Do I hit him with a right hand or a left hook? What's my quickest way of knocking him out and just leaving? And then all of a sudden I told myself, no. And I said, Lord, please help me. I might have even said that out loud. And when I said that, the waitress came and he left. Imagine if I would have reacted differently. Imagine if I would have knocked him out. The article in the newspaper could have looked like this: Héctor Colón, president and CEO, knocks out guy and is fired. I worked so hard with incredible odds stacked up against me to get where I'm at. To give that all up? Or even worse, Héctor Colón knocks guy out, continues to pummel him and kills him and is in jail or in prison. What about my family, my life, all that I've worked so hard for? Let me tell you another story. Vernon Forrest, the guy that I beat 3 times, that became a 4-time world champion. Here's his story. He's at a gas station. He's putting gas in his car. His grandson goes to use the bathroom. As his grandson is using the bathroom and he's putting gas, somebody sticks him up. And they take his watch and his ring. And then they start going. He goes into his car. He gets a gun. He goes out there and tries to chase him down. He can't get him. So then he starts walking back. And he's shot not once, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. Vernon Forrest, a 4-time world champion who lacked temperance, is dead. And so it wasn't worth it. Vernon Forrest was a millionaire. He didn't need the watch or the ring. He just lost self-control and wanted to fight back. So I share those 2 examples because they really illustrate when you do act with temperance and when you don't, and the ramifications around that.
I think that's one of the hardest things, raising, not just sons, it's every human being. We have these moments where emotions hit you like that, and the ability to stop and just breathe for a second. And we've all made the mistake, or certainly I have, where I've made the mistake of not saying what I really wanted to say, not showing up the way I wanted to show up. This is, I think that's what you said earlier, temperance, one of your favorites, because it's not talked about often. And these life-defining moments, had you reacted differently in that restaurant, as Vernon unfortunately chose to react the way he did, no, he's no longer, it's a gas station, somebody he'll never see again. And it's such a sad tale, but it's one that needs to be shared so we can all say, hey, look, just stop for a second and think about the repercussions before you act. I think it's brilliant. Here's a word that I don't know that I've ever said aloud or in a sentence, certainly. Magnanimity. I hope I even pronounce magnanimity. I think I got it, but yeah, man, tell me about that. I'm curious to see how this word comes into play with boxing and life in general.
So this is really the virtuous striving for excellence. Alexander Havard called this the virtue of striving for personal excellence. And the ancient philosophers also talked about it within that context. And so I think about the virtue of magnanimity. And what I learned in the sport of boxing is that you have to have daily habits, rituals, and routines in order to be great. So when I was a boxer, I would wake up every morning, below 0 degrees, I'm out there running. Snow, it didn't matter. And I would do a lot of self-talk. There's no way Vernon Forrest, who at the time lived in Atlanta, Georgia, is running in the snow. I am tougher than him. I'm going to beat him. And then I'd lift weights in the afternoon. I'd work out in the evenings. I'd go to sleep early when my friends were out there partying. I'd wake up early. I was eating a really good, clean diet. I was watching tapes of some of the greatest who have ever graced the ring. I was doing everything a boxer needed to do in order to become a champion. So that's that virtue of magnanimity, that striving for greatness. And when you're a boxer, nothing but number 1 is ever good enough. Nothing but the championship title is ever good enough. Of those 7 titles, 10 years of boxing, only 3 years I wasn't rated number 1 in the country. Those 3 years, twice I was rated number 2 and once number 3. And let me tell you, that was horrible in my mind. I wanted to become the champion. So how do we apply that into life? I think that we need to try to become champions for our spouse, champion for our children, champions for our employers, champions for our community. And if you don't have daily habits, daily rituals, and daily routines that's going to help you become better leaders, better fathers, better husbands, better community members, you're never going to be the greatest. So that's why I love talking about this virtue of magnanimity, because it's intentional, it's effort, it's dedication, determination, and discipline.
Well, and here's what I love about the concept is that even when you hit number 1, you don't get to rest on your laurels, because there's always somebody that maybe they're running in 30 below somewhere wanting to come get you, right? I mean, that's the whole idea. And this is what I talk about often in the tagline of Let's Go Win, getting better every day, because you never arrive. The moment we think we've arrived, we've started to lose immediately. And that's why Kaizen, from Japanese culture to getting better every day to magnanimity. Now I can say this one and really know what I'm talking about. You never arrive. And those are the great champions that you had mentioned earlier before. You said 4-time world champion for Vernon. That was, where he didn't just do it once, he got and did it again, maybe a different weight class, but he kept striving. And that, I love that idea, brother. I really am glad that you brought that to this, and I can't wait to read the book. All right. One of my favorites, perseverance. I can only imagine, again, without being trained as a boxer, the workouts you guys do, you have to have this one, or you couldn't last, right? I mean, I don't think people understand how hard 3 minutes in a ring is, let alone 12, 15 rounds. And that's why this training is so important. Talk to me about perseverance.
Yeah, the training is really rigorous. It's very hard, but it's also very inspiring. And you train so hard so you can win. And the problem is you don't always win. And that's where the perseverance has to come from your soul, to say, okay, I lost, but I have to get back up, and I'm going to come back even stronger, and I'm going to win the next time. And I think about my own life in boxing. So I lost my first fight and I wanted to give up. But I remember my coach saying, come on, champ, you got natural abilities. Don't give up so easily. This is going to take some time. And then I fought again and I lost again. And this time I really wanted to give up. I felt that this intense fear you feel, nothing fun about that. You lose. And then I started crying. I'm humiliated. I said, Shorty, I'm done. And then it was the way he talked to me. He said, come on, champ. Don't be a quitter. You can become a champ. You hear me? You can become a champ. Let's do this. And it was that, again, that confidence that he had in me. And look, a 7-time national champion, competed all over the world with the United States national boxing team, almost made the Olympics, and learning all the honor and prestige to represent the United States of America. I fought against Russia and Poland and Germany and Barbados and Canada and all over the world, representing the United States. The honor and prestige and responsibility that comes along with that is outstanding. And so if I would have given up, I wouldn't have that global experience that I have today, that I'm so appreciative of. It really has shaped my life and who I am. But also after boxing, I remember I got back into school and I got into occupational therapy. It's a very hard field. And at first people were telling me you should be maybe a gym teacher, or low expectations. And I fought really hard, and I graduated with honors, and I got a 3.83 for my master's degree. Then I took my entrance exam to practice occupational therapy, and I failed. I was devastated. I need this certificate so I can practice occupational therapy. I'm no longer boxing. I need a career. I took it again. I failed again. And this time I was wounded. I was like, well, what do I do? I can't pass this test. Maybe I should go back to boxing. Then I heard Shorty, that echo in my ear, that voice say, don't be a quitter, champ. Come on, champ. Then I studied with the rigor and intensity. It took me to be an honor roll student to pass that darn test. And I did. And that has afforded me many opportunities in my career. If I would have given up, I wouldn't be where I'm at here today.
Well, to have that voice in your corner, again, I'm thinking as you're talking about all these amazing boxing movies that I've loved through the years, and all the sayings that we say, it's not about how many times you get knocked down, it's about how many times you get up. These are all related to boxing. And I don't think we stop and realize, how much it really influenced all of our culture, because boxing was so big before, the 80s is really where I think it started to kind of go the other way, where it's not, the top sport, but the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, I mean, boxing was the thing. And I think maybe we've forgotten that about how many lessons we've learned. I want to ask you a question, then I will get into some of your, what you're doing in business and leadership today. But as a boxer, because I'm a huge fan of the movies, do you have a favorite one that you're like, this is a movie that I will watch time and again because it's so inspirational?
I'd have to say the Rocky movies. Probably Rocky IV was the best one. In Russia, Drago, during the war. So I'd say all the Rocky movies, but specifically Rocky IV. Those are classics. You can watch them many, many, many times, and you keep getting inspired. That music just makes you go out there and want to run, and get in shape.
That's awesome. Do you still hit the bag today, Hector?
So I do, because my son just started boxing. I've been bobbing and weaving this conversation for 17 years. And, in the beginning of the school year last year, he started hanging around with these friends. They weren't terrible, but they didn't have fathers, and they were very negative. They hated school. And Elian, my son, started being a little distant and negative. And so then he brought up boxing again. And I told my wife, I said, look, boxing is going to shape his ass up. So he's been talking about this. He's a grown adult, let's take him to the gym. So sure enough, I did. And he's been in the gym for less than a year. He's made incredible strides. He had one fight. He knocked a guy out in the second round. And he's really taken it. All the virtues I just talked about, I'm seeing him live them out in their entirety, even better than what I did, I feel like. And so he has really inspired me to see him. He's found his passion, and he knows why I gave up the sport. He read my book. He's seen my keynote speeches. I don't have to repeat that to him. Right now, I'm just supporting him because this is what he wants to do right now.
No, good for you as a parent to allow him to have his own journey and sit back and support. It's not always easy, right? Especially if we've had that journey in that, but it's his, and that's beautiful. Let's talk about what you're doing with Lutheran Social Services. What's the vision? What are you working on as the CEO? And what's really getting you out of bed every single day and firing you up in professionally speaking?
Yeah, I love this organization. It's a wonderful organization. By the way, I'm the first non-Lutheran, non-pastor, non-Norwegian to run this organization in 140 years. So they took a big step in me. I'm so appreciative. This is a wonderful organization. We serve about 30,000 individuals on an annual basis, individuals who have incredible odds stacked up against them. So a child in crisis who has nowhere to turn, a family in turmoil that might be facing eviction, someone struggling with severe persistent mental illness or addiction, an elderly person or a person with a disability that needs just a little bit of help to live independently and successfully in the community, or a refugee that's fleeing from war and persecution. We've been providing services to these individuals for 140 years. Me for the last 6 years. So I feel so humbled and honored that I can be a part of this organization. We have 750 colleagues that I've learned so much from, that they're so humble, they're so compassionate. They come here to meet our mission, which is to act compassionately, serve humbly, and lead courageously. This organization is outstanding. And I'll share with you a little bit. There's been a major turnaround since I've been in this organization. When I started 6 years ago, we had $73,000 in the bank. Today, we have 25 million of cash and investments. In our endowment, we had $12 million of investable funds. Today, we have 27 million. When I got here, we met 2 budgets in 10 years, losing $13 million. Since I have been here, it's been a net income $30 million turnaround over those 5 years, so not 6. And so it's what that has allowed us to pay our staff better, commensurate to the value they provide. Today, we are serving more people with better quality, and the organization is as strong as it's been. I say in 140 years, but my CFO said he can only go back 21 years. So we'll keep it at that.
Well, good for the organization to hire somebody that is not a pastor, is not a Lutheran, is not Norwegian, to really look out and say, why does that matter, right? Historically speaking, this is what we've always done. However, maybe we need a new set of eyes, which clearly that has been a huge part of it, is your lens looking at it differently to say, I don't care how we've always done it. Let's do it better. Let's use some magnanimity, and let's strive for excellence. How were you able to make such a turnaround in 6 years? We're $30 million, because it's not like you came in with a grotesque budget, or at least I'm not hearing that.
Right.
How were you able to do it? Because those nuts and bolts is what I would love for people to hear, because no matter how dire the circumstance is, you can too. You can create this change in your own organization. So I'm just curious, Hector, how were you able to do that?
There's a lot of things that we had to do. But first, I would say that it's the servant leadership team and approach to all of this transformation. I started off in the organizations with 5 questions. I said, what are the biggest challenge the organization is facing? Why are we facing those challenges? What are some of our biggest opportunities for growth? What do we need to do to leverage those opportunities? And if you were me, what would you focus your attention on? It is literally the answers and insights to those questions asked from the over 700 colleagues in our board that transformed this organization. They knew the answers, they knew the insights. Now, we had to synthesize that information, put it together in the strategic plan, and execute. And so I think that was one of the most important reasons to get that buy-in, to get that involvement, to get the staff perspective that led to our turnaround. So that's first and foremost the most important part. But 85% of the board of directors is new. We flattened the organization by $1 million. We divested of over $13 million worth of programs. Nonprofits don't do that. We love people. We want to serve people and expand our programs, not contract it. But because we divested of over 13, now we were able to strategically grow by over 20 million in programs where we had margin, we had high quality, where we could serve more people. And so we initiated a productivity initiative. Again, not so much talked about in the nonprofit sector, but we wanted to make sure that our therapists were productive in doing the work. One, to make sure that they were serving the people that needed us most. But 2, this is a business and we got to have revenue to support our staff. And so that brought millions to the bottom line. We started renegotiating our contracts. You know, before we would approach a county or a state, a contracted partner, when it was too late. They already did their budget. Of course they can. So we developed a whole lean process, double-digit increases that brought millions to the bottom line. And then we also did a little bit more on fundraising. So it's really a combination of all of those things that turned the organization around.
Well, you guys hear the humility right away, goes to the group and says, tell me what we need to work on. The answers are all within. We're just not asking the questions. I am curious, brother, when you went to divest, that can't be a popular decision. I can't imagine they're like, yes, we put Hector in charge and now he's taking this program. These are programs that they're proud of, that there's a lot of, a lot of time, energy, money have been put into these. That couldn't have been a popular decision. I'm curious how you dealt with that, because as business leaders, not a shocker to anybody listening, but we make tough decisions. They're not always popular. How did you deal with that, brother, to know that this was the right direction?
We had to articulate the why. And I'll give you one example. Adoption. LSS has been doing adoption services for many, many years. And we do domestic adoption, we did international adoption, and special needs adoption. And we were losing $500,000-600,000 a year in doing adoptions. And we were serving maybe 10 families in domestic and international, 10 families, wealthier families. And so I asked a question, who are we trying to serve? And if we had $600,000, we could serve hundreds of families who have incredible odds stacked up against them, who really need our services. So that's one example. We had to articulate the why, because there were many board members even that were adopted by LSS. And at some point they were like, oh, okay, Hector, you're doing good. You're getting rid of a few things, but don't get rid of adoption. You can't do that. It'll kill us. But once we articulated the why, in which, by the way, we're not out of adoption. Now we're focused on special needs adoption, individuals who have incredible odds stacked up against them, emotional, physical, sexual abuse. We're here for them. That's the population we're called to serve. And we do over 400 of those on an annual basis. And we have the revenue to be able to do that well now. So that's one example. But yeah, no, this is hard stuff, man. It's hard decisions, but I would again say we did it with a servant-led heart. It wasn't like, here, we're doing this with an axe. There was a lot of discussion, articulating the why, making sure our staff were taken care of, transitioning the programs to others in the community, getting the buy-in of the board, and again, so it was a very good project. We have an amazing chief operating officer that led many of these efforts. And again, servant-led heart, the right thing to do. You're right, not easy, very hard.
Maybe the most important question, I'm saying this tongue in cheek, but being a Packer fan, I got to know, what's your prediction, man? How are the boys going to do up there in Wisconsin? Because my boys and I were optimistically, we're trying our best, man. What do you think? What are you seeing out there?
I have faith in Love, the new guy coming in. We got to give him a shot. They believe in him. They see the potential in him. It sounds like he has some really good moments in practice. And so we got to give him a shot. We got spoiled in Wisconsin. We had Brett Favre, and then Rodgers. I mean, there was dominance, MVP, best quarterbacks in the league for decades. And so it's going to be hard to fill in those shoes. But I'm semi optimistic that Love might be able to do it. But we got to find out quick, and if not, we got to pivot. But it's hard shoes to fill, no doubt about that. Following Favre and Aaron Rodgers, my gosh, that's no easy thing to do.
Boy, that's no kidding. 30 years of absolute incredible quarterback play. Listen, Jordan, sending you love, brother. Let's have a great season. No, in all seriousness, Hector, is there anything I missed that I should have known to ask you that you want to share with the audience as we wrap up?
Yeah, I just want to say, look up my website, champinstitute.com. Again, champinstitute.com. I do keynote speaking, so invite me to your corporation, to your business, to your community. I promise to bring out the champion in you. It's inspiring, it's vulnerable, it's emotional, and again, destined to bring out the champion in you. My book is available on my website as well, champinstitute.com, where it's available on Amazon. And look us up at LSS, lsswis.org, and become part of this family and make a difference in the lives of individuals who have incredible odds stacked up against them. Would appreciate it very much.
Guys, go look him up. Check it out. I mean, this interview couldn't have gone better. I could talk to him for days about boxing, business, life. He's just led so many interesting lives inside of one, and it's just remarkable. So absolutely go check him out. Hector, you're awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming, sharing these essential virtues of leadership and all the amazing work you're doing up in Wisconsin and Michigan. That's amazing.
Thank you, JM, and it's a pleasure. I could tell you're a really good person. It'd be great to be with you in person someday and come visit you, because I know you're good people.
I'll speak on stage with you any day of the week, brother. We'd have a lot of fun. Hey, you guys, make sure to share this. I mean, I learned a word. I've heard it. I didn't know what it meant exactly. And I got to learn that. I thought that was really cool. And these 5 virtues he learned from boxing, it's so incredible. And it's so applicable to everyday life. Make sure to share this with someone that you love and care about. Until next time, remember, your mindset matters. I appreciate you all so much. We'll talk soon. Thank you so much for listening. If this content is delivering value to you, please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review us. That helps us build this community, and that is what we are all about. Building this community as big as we can, helping as many people as we can, and deliver as much value as possible. Be sure to head over to letsgowinpodcast.com for information on my coaching courses, and make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Let's Go Win 365. Let's go win and transcend in life.
This is the Let's Go Win podcast with your host, JM Ryerson.